Hi, this is Paul Desmond. I'm in the Schneider Electric booth at the AFCOM Data Center World Conference, and I've caught up with George Sutton, who is Director of Sales for Schneider for the US and Canada. Welcome, George.
Hey, good morning. Thank you very much, Paul.
So I sat in on your session this morning where you were talking about prefab data centers, and I wanted to ask you just a few follow-up questions if
Certainly.
I could.
Absolutely.
First, you started with a story about the Social Security Administration and the data center they're building from scratch, and some issues, I guess you'd say, they're having. Can you tell us a little about that?
So this is actually an issue we run into quite a lot with traditional data centers because they're very complex and large projects. In the case of the Social Security Administration, they had projected a 5-year plan to rebuild their data center or build a new data center. They're now 5 years into it, and it's projected to be a 4-year over the time frame. So almost a 10-year project scope that originally was only supposed to be 5 years. So obviously the costs have now escalated to 3 to 4 times what they initially were. And this is something we run into all the time with traditional build of data centers.
So as you said in the presentation, one solution is a prefab modular data center.
Right.
And you made the point that a lot of times when people think of prefab, they think of ISO containers, but it's really a lot more than that?
Yeah, so initially the prefab market was primarily the ISO containers, which are the corrugated steel containers you see on the back of trucks and on ships and stuff like that. And they were primarily used for the oil and gas and mining business out in very rough environments where it was difficult to build a traditional data center. But now really it's evolved into 3 different markets. The ISO is still a very large market for us. The non-ISO, which is a structure similar to the ISO except it's longer, wider and taller, has smooth walls, and inside really looks and feels very much like a traditional data center. And has a lot of the same advantages of a traditional data center, but also has the advantages of the prefabricated data center, which are very fast to be able to build and deploy, and very secure and safe and fire protected, etc. And then the last one is what we call a smart shelter modular room, which is a pre-engineered room. Everything is pre-cut to order, and then it's shipped flat and it's built on site. And this dramatically decreases the amount of time and dust and things like that you have on site to build your data center. And it also has all the protections of the modular data center, such as 2-hour fire rating, 1,000 degrees. So your building could be burned down on the outside, and all your data equipment is protected inside that room.
Very good. And you also talked about operating costs and how the modular units are generally more energy efficient.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so in a traditional data center, you have a lot of wasted space, both overhead and on the sides. Generally, that's to allow personnel to move around and equipment to move around. In a modular data center, we're really taking the whole idea of hot and cold aisle containment, and we're building it into a module. So the modules come with all of the hot and cold aisle containment built into them, which really that's the biggest, the most dramatic cost savings that there has been in the data center for quite some time, is the ability to really control that airflow in the hot and cold aisle. And you have complete control over that in a modular data center. And then also, because the panels that we use have a very high insulation factor and are very well protected from sun and the heat from outside. So the data center is very, very highly efficient because, number one, you're compacting the amount of space, the air that you have to cool and to regulate, and then also those panels are forming a very high level of insulation.
Okay. And going back to the Social Security Administration experience, I guess these systems are much quicker to deploy than that, right? What's the typical deployment time, would you say?
Right, so a traditional data center, we usually say takes 12 to 24 months to deploy. In the case of modular, you're really down to 12 to 24 weeks to deploy. So it's dramatically cutting the deployment time. And that's from the time that you give us a signed off approval of the design to we start the build, and then usually it's 12 to 24 weeks that we drop them on site and you're ready to start loading your equipment.
Very good. Now, you've been at this a long time. I know you came to Schneider through the acquisition of AST.
That's right, yeah.
And the number of jobs that you've done and the experience you've had, what would you say are some of the more interesting data centers you've deployed?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I think they're all really quite intriguing to me. We have one that we're doing for a large oil company out in Bakersfield, California, that's a total of 5 modules. And the whole data center is built on a seismic pad, that the whole pad, which is roughly, it's about 300 by 300, so what's that, about 9,000 square feet. The whole pad will move in case of an earthquake, and the data center is being built on top of that. So it's a tier 4 data center. So very cool project for me. Another one that is very interesting, one of the first projects that I had the opportunity to work on when I joined AST several years ago was with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which was a supercomputer mounted in a 20-foot ISO container on the back of a semi-trailer with a generator mounted on the trailer with it. Has quick disconnects for all of the cabling, both for land or utility connections and the generator. And the purpose of that data center, or the supercomputer that's in the data center, is it's a supercomputer to do gene splicing. In case of a biohazard attack on the U.S., they would deploy that data center to the site of the biohazard attack to be able to determine the origin of that biohazard attack. So very, very cool project. It actually got sponsorship out of some very high levels in Congress and in the Senate. So had some very high level people coming to look at it.
Wow, how do we like that? Congress actually did something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right, George, well, I'll let you get back to the event, but thanks for taking a couple of minutes here.
You bet. Thank you very much, Paul, for your time.